Welcome to this week's edition of L.I.F.S. Mo, how are you doing?
Well, we're in episode 6. I'm doing great. You've had quite the 2 weeks since I last saw you in Baltimore.
Yeah, I've been traveling across the UK. It's been an exciting trip actually to see what's going on over there. It's been a little while since I've met and got to sit down with a number of people in the fitness industry. So some really exciting stuff that's going on over there, and quite refreshing to see a lot of innovation coming into the sector.
So is that innovation, Matthew, happening with your team at Escape, or are you mostly meeting with internal people or external folks?
Yeah, plenty of innovation going on in Escape, but it was more to do with just getting out into the market and seeing what's happening with some of the existing operators, and also a number of new people that are entering the space. That was quite inspirational, really, considering what's happened to the industry. There's so many people with some great ideas and a lot of enthusiasm, really. So hopefully, I think over the next couple of years, there's certainly some exciting things to come, I'm sure, which is a little bit different to what we've all been through.
Yeah, and look, this in-person experience, it's funny, I was speaking with Peter King, who's the founder of Waterward, this morning, and he's got a whirlwind coming up next week. I mean, he's traveling all over the world in 5 days, using the plane as the hotel, as I'm sure all of us have done on this call today. And we were just talking about the importance of doing things in person and the value that brings over just doing all calls over Zoom, and how much more that is helping move innovation and move partnerships forward. And look, I actually spent a day in Boston. So on Monday, I was in Boston, spent most of my day with the good folks at Hydro, and they're doing some innovative things. I mean, I'm really excited to see what they're going to be doing in 2024. But what nice people to work with. I'm sure all of us on this call have worked with some folks over there. But then also, I think rowing in general, at least from the things that I'm seeing, has yet to have its moment, right? I mean, Jim, we'll introduce you in a second, but you've come from this functional fitness CrossFit community where rowing has been so important. I feel like right now we're in a strength movement, and I think rowing is probably going to follow. And I had a chance to try out their equipment and just some of the newer experiences, immersive things that they're working on. And I think, I think rowing rowing's time is yet to come. But glad that we're here on episode 6, and we have a special guest today, a good friend who I've gotten to know well over the last several years. And so, Jim, welcome to the L.I.F.T.S podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I was excited to come on. I enjoy the format a lot.
Well, no, we're excited to have you on. And look, the format around this podcast has really been about these side conversations, phone calls, dinners that I've been having with Matthew, I've been having with you, and us just picking up the phone, talking over the weekend, talking about things happening in the industry. So we wanted to bring that out in the open. I'm going to give you a quick intro, Jim. So Jim is a sought-after investor and advisor with more than 20 years of experience in the fitness and wellness industry. His impressive background includes 6 years as CEO at OPEX Fitness, 15 years of advising and educating fitness and technology companies, 4 years of owning multiple gyms. I'm almost out of breath. And 5 years as a successful energy hedge fund trader. So Jim is highly sought after. And Jim, your main focus today has been the managing member at Sage House. Why don't you tell the audience a bit about what Sage House is about?
In short, we want to be a boutique fitness investment company. We want to invest in different types of companies and different structures within the fitness and wellness space. We may get closer to health, I think, because the industry is going to continue to get closer to health, but we just want to have a hand in helping to build the industry in a pretty meaningful way.
And Jim, fun fact, and then Matthew will hand it off to you, but you also competed in the CrossFit Games in 2015.
Yeah, that seems like a lifetime ago, guys. I am 25 pounds lighter than I was then. And let's just say that I had a bit of a fast twitch muscle fiber problem. I'm very aerobic and very grindy, and lifting those heavy weights was really hard. So that was a fun time, but probably good for me that it's over.
Well, thanks for joining us, Jim. Well, you mentioned the health, the crossover between fitness and health, and I think that's probably a good place to start with our first story, which is the new Apple Watch to detect blood pressure, sleep apnea, and health coach service planned. It says that Apple is introducing new health features to its Apple Watch next year, according to a report from Bloomberg. The watch will support a new system for detecting sleep apnea and a blood pressure sensor. Apple is also working on a health coaching service and new health features for its AirPods and upcoming mixed reality headset. I guess with the big tech companies, it's quite interesting to see how many of them are looking at the bigger arena of fitness and how it combines with the medical and I guess the medical space, and just curious to get your thoughts on this one, Mo.
Yeah, I mean, this really continues the evolution of the Apple Watch. Look, when Apple Watch was first released almost 10 years ago now, I don't think they really knew what it was meant to be. Was this meant to be a mini version of your iPhone on your wrist where you could leave your phone behind? Was this, meant to be a tool where you could just get notifications from your phone? And the way they saw it being used most frequently was for fitness, and really as a fitness and wellness tracker. The first Apple Watch did not even have GPS, so you couldn't really even track your runs accurately. The second Apple Watch brought GPS and advanced heart rate monitoring sensors. So since then, the Apple Watch has really had incremental upgrades, and I think what they're talking about for 2024, and I'm just calling it Apple Watch X. That is not a formal term, but I've been calling it Apple Watch X, is going to add at least 3 new sensors that can warn users if they are pre-diabetic, sense rising blood pressure, and alert people if they have sleep apnea. This also continues Apple's trend and really movement to go directly into healthcare. And here's some things that people might not be aware of. Apple has sold 230 million Apple Watches around the world so far. They've sold 150 million AirPods around the world. It is the luxury device that is on your wrist. It's really not about the Rolex or about your earrings. The most successful wearable, by some measure, I would say, is the AirPods, and then followed by the Apple Watch. And I would not be surprised if AirPods, the next generation of AirPod Pros coming out, is also going to have health sensing features in it, built into it as well. So where is Apple trying to go with this? And I don't think they've kept this a secret. They really want to disrupt healthcare. They're really going full force into healthcare. They own the biggest data set. I mean, they own more data on people than any healthcare organization in the world today. And I think they're looking to leverage that and really take center stage in the largest industry in the world. Jim, would love to get your thoughts. I mean, you've been in this space for quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and one sentence of context before I start, I really thought a lot about the principles of what all these topics that we're going to talk about today might mean. And when I think about the principles of Apple, they have an incredibly disruptible vertical of healthcare that they have all of the infrastructure parts to go disrupt. And so I think it's inevitable that they have to go disrupt healthcare as a means of growth for Apple. And so they have, to your point, Mo, they have such a strong piece of hardware, which I love to call it wrist real estate. Like, people aren't putting more things on their wrist, just generally speaking, right, than typically a watch. And the sensors are going to get better and better and better. And there are some unique companies coming out that are going to increase the sensors and the APIs around the sensors to give things like Apple Watch even more data. But you can't really compete with the strength of the Apple Watch for what the Apple Watch does, which is all of these different things. And they will then go out through APIs, et cetera, to place this data into the niche audiences to nail down these experiences.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I do think that there's going to be other companies that are coming up, hopefully companies that are going to be able to take the data and provide some context to it. So what Apple released this year with their Workout API, with bringing Apple Health into the iPad, is really an expansion of what they have. So I think what we'll find is that they're going to collect and aggregate more data. I mean, look, with Apple Health today, it's a great aggregator. When we build fitness apps or workout apps, we always connect with Apple Health. Why do we do that? It's because if you have an Aura, if you have a Whoop, anything, that's a great way to get access to that data. But look, ultimately, Apple wants to not only report on the data, but also collect on the data. And I think the other thing that they announced here too is that they're going to come out with an AI-based coach that's going to help prescribe what type of workouts you should be doing, what you potentially could be eating. Look, a lot of people have been working on this non-invasive CGM sensor. I've been seeing it at CES for the last several years. It's going to be a long way to get FDA approved. So I think the approach that Apple is taking here is one that they've used with the watch so far. So your Apple Watch today has an EKG sensor on it and an L.I.F.T.S sensor on it as well, but they're really not fully FDA certified. They're not graded as medical grade devices yet. And because Apple is going to come out with the technology, they're taking the smart approach of just saying, look, we'll leave it up to the legacy experts to go ahead and go through the certification, but we can still start collecting the data today and at least start helping people. And I don't know what the fact is, but I do know that the AFib monitoring in Apple Watch has actually saved lives. It's already saved many lives, and you keep on hearing about those types of stories.
Well, and they're building the infrastructure to make the experience seamless, which is such an Apple move as well. So if you go to the, Apple Health platforms and the products around Apple Health, look at all the stuff that they're doing with iPads in hospitals now and how much of an improved experience they can offer. And so when you start to ask the question, well, should I use this new Apple wearable? You almost have to, because it's a part of the global ecosystem that they are creating. So if you see Apple in the hospital, and then you see Apple in telehealth, and then you have the option of getting an Apple Watch or something else, it's Apple's seamless. It's the principle of just making everything seamlessly fit together that I believe they're building out in what appears to be a very meaningful way. I'm with you that I do think you're going to see really strong companies come into the pipeline for niche products and niche coaching experiences and niche suggestion engines, because Apple won't play that game because they can't scale it to 200 million people. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for companies to come in and play with Apple. But I don't think you're just going to remove the Apple Watch, for example, if you're coming in with a new wearable.
Well, we'll move on to the next story now, and it's really combining culture, politics, and business. And the first one in this sort of arena is Spartan, and there's an article in Lifestyle magazine, and it says Spartan Arabia condemns group founders' comments on Israel and Gaza war. Spartan Arabia, the Middle East franchise of a globally popular obstacle race, Spartan, is distancing itself from comments made by founder and chief executive Joe DeSena about the Israel-Gaza war. It's an interesting subject, and I actually raised it on a podcast last week with the guys at One Rebel, where we're talking about this. And I suppose it's interesting to get your thoughts in terms of what is business role in culture, politics, because certainly many CEOs recently have got themselves into quite sort of murky water, and when they start making comments that are not necessarily core to their business and end up doing a lot more harm than good. So what are your guys' thoughts on the Joe DeSena comments?
I'll go first.
Go, Jim.
Yeah, sure. That is not the way that I would communicate. And so I want to be really careful here. Many companies have taken the stance that they are very particularly aligned communicators, people with belief systems, etc. And those belief systems often play through communications, social media posts, announcements, etc. I think to have a long-term durable company, people need to know what you really stand for with day-to-day actions of how you are actually delivering product, delivering experiences to your customers. And when people see something that is outside of that belief or that value set, that's usually what sets off, the firecrackers. Now, let me also say that it's extremely hard to put your hat in any of these political buckets. That's one of the reasons, honestly, I just don't. But it's very hard to do that and not have a large percentage of people who sit on the opposite side of that not be highly, highly upset, offended. And I think that's how we are sort of creating buckets of people, right? It's like, I believe in this sort of thing, which means I don't believe in this thing, and I don't want to see that with the brands and people that I trust. I think, though, that businesses need to be very careful with engaging, and particularly in engaging very early in these highly politically charged events. Because for me, for example, I'm not the expert in that topic whatsoever. And so there's no way that I could throw my hat in the ring, even if I had an early feeling one way or the other.
Yeah, look, first off, I've known Joe DeSena and Spartan for over a decade. They were one of the first brands that we worked with since 2012, and I've had a chance to spend a lot of time with him around the world, and I know him to be a good person and a really stand-up individual. But at the same time, you know, I agree with you, Jim. I think the comments were out of line, and it looks like he has since deleted that Instagram post and come out with an apology. But this goes back to the point of, you know, we're here to make people's lives better in any way possible. We're here to help democratize access. And that's really what all of us, people listening to this pod, us on the call here, are focused on every day, to build a suite of product and services that could eventually impact someone's life in a positive manner. Yet, from a societal perspective, we've kind of really come into this world where it's in this culture of where it is us versus them. And to your point, people jump to conclusions very, very quickly by just looking at images, but looking at things on social media. And as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and I'm sure you felt this, there's almost like a need or a feeling of, well, you've got to say something, you know, this also happened with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, which we saw happen where if you didn't come out with something, and does your silence mean that you're supporting one side or the other? And if you say something and you say the wrong thing, as Joe clearly did here, then you end up alienating his constituents and his participants in the Middle East who feel strongly about this issue. It's definitely challenging, and it is unfortunate that I think issues can't be managed with dignity and grace, and that we just can't have conversation. But we tend to live in this world and this culture that is based on this cancel culture, where it's fight or flight, and people, you know, if Uber does something bad, we want to get rid of them. And for the longest time, fitness has managed to keep that separate, to kind of keep that noise out, and let us just focus on doing what we do well. And it looks like it's slowly starting to creep into this now. And I think that's an unfortunate circumstance to happen.
And
it is particularly.
Sorry, Matthew, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Okay.
If I go back to principles on this one, I do think that there is a huge trade-off principle and a huge incentive problem here, where it actually is quite helpful to pick a side, particularly early in a business. And let's just call it right and left for lack of better term right now. But it's helpful because it makes your audience more rabid about the thing or the product that you're offering. It's just that there becomes a point where that incentive structure and trade-off has to flip to get more into the general population if you want your company to scale to a certain point. And I'm not here to say you should scale it beyond that point or not. I'm just saying it's tough to get out of the gates and make a group of people believe you mean something really important to them, and then all of a sudden be hands off. And so it made me think about it when you mentioned the Black Lives Matter, because I can vividly remember those conversations when everything came up, and it did feel like it was a big mistake not to say anything in that moment. And so I think that people just really need to be careful and mindful about how aggressively they make specific statements around these politically charged topics, because the trade-off is a lot of people are going to be upset. The question is what do they do about it? And that's a little bit different for each event.
Yeah, I think the other, you know, there's many, certainly for a brand stands for something. And I think the problem is that we as business owners, leaders, you end up getting dragged into a discussion that maybe is not the way to differentiate what you're about and your values in many cases. I'm not saying that this was the right or wrong thing to do, but the conversation I had earlier this week is, look, we're a gym. We're about getting everybody into fitness, where it's an inclusive sport, or it's an inclusive product, and there's ways to differentiate within that. But I think when you start getting into things like politics, religion, etc., it's a very difficult thing to yes, it's very, very, very difficult thing to navigate. And it brings me on to the second story, which is on Fox News. Mo sent it to me this morning, and I actually was listening to the Theo Von podcast yesterday because they interviewed Dana White, and it was very entertaining. But the article in Fox News basically says that UFC president slams Peloton for pulling podcast ads over JFK Jr. interview and cited brand safety. And I think as anyone who listened to Dana, he's got extremely strong opinions, but he really tore into the company for this statement that they made. I think the story was that Theo Von had Peloton as an advertiser, and they basically told him to take down the interview where they were sponsoring JFK Jr. And in return, Dana White basically told one of his guys to go up into the gym, throw out all the Peloton bikes, and spent about 20 minutes digging into how bad Peloton was and why they're a terrible company. So I think it's very difficult as well. You know, if you're a company and you're doing marketing initiatives where you're trying to promote your business, and then you have an opinion about, you know, the types of content that people are talking about, and you end up in an unnecessary argument in my mind, for a company that's selling fitness and selling bikes, and now suddenly they've done more damage to the company by sort of, you know, linking themselves or not linking themselves with specific content.
Yeah, I think, you know, for some reason, Peloton around the holidays, I don't know what this is, they always end up shooting themselves in the foot. They do these gaffes, and they had the commercial 2 years ago where they had, you know, someone who looked like she was being forced to accept a Christmas gift that was a Peloton bike. Look, I don't understand why Peloton had to come in and particularly point out, if you want to pull advertising out of a particular podcaster or platform, just pull it out. But then to go into, well, I'm going to pull it out because of this, you're clearly making a point. You're clearly impressing your opinion, and you're putting your finger, and you're applying pressure, right? So what is Theo Von supposed to do? Not have RFK Jr. on his podcast, not talk about that topic? I think it's a little bit unfair, right? So I think, you know, from a brand standpoint, they should be focused on reaching the people that they need to reach to help make their lives better. Be focused on, again, selling bikes, selling the core competency. And I just don't know what makes them think that they had the authority to really come to a podcast platform that they are sponsoring and then say, well, because you choose to talk about this topic or have this person on, I'm going to pull my ad, because now they're trying to shape the narrative of that platform. And I just don't think it's not Peloton's core competency.
I'd be really curious to understand the rhetoric inside of Peloton before the decision was made. I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, that there was a pretty significant amount of negative feedback from the Peloton staff about that, which, not dissimilarly to a number of other political events, makes it feel like you have to do something. And so it's, again, not a right or a wrong. It's just, it's always probably challenging when you're in that moment. And Peloton has certainly tried to solidify themselves as inclusive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so if they were going to take a stance, I'm not surprised that they took a stance in something like this. So again, to me, it goes back to, who are they trying to portray themselves as to the public? And then, Mo, to your point, you know, they gaff all the time at the holidays, right?
Yeah,
But,
they just
you
keep
know,
on shooting themselves in the
yeah.
foot. But Jim, so I'm curious, do you, from your perspective, do you view, yeah, look, I'm a Peloton rider, as a lot of people know. I have the bike, the tread. I'm a big fan of the brand, and I love the product. I love the product, but I feel like they're out of touch with reality. I feel like they're out of touch with their focused consumer, right? Like, even if you look at their commercials, not everyone lives on a penthouse in Soho in a $15 million unit. It's just not reality. So I feel like sometimes they still continue to do actions that have continued on from their former executive days now to the new executive that appear to be out of touch with the reality and the industry. I mean, they've made statements like, oh, the gym's obsolete, and they haven't shown that they've changed that. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts from your perspective. How do you think Peloton views themselves?
I think that they began to shift pretty aggressively after all of the blowback from the penthouse sets of ads. And I think that they, from what I've seen, and I'm not a Peloton expert by any means, guys, but I have seen far more diversity in the people that they use to advertise, in the instructors that they've used to advertise, in the message that they're putting out. They are, to me, clearly going after a much more inclusive feel, which in today's day and age, inclusivity often means pushing back against the opposite of, right? And so I think that we're seeing them pick their lane. Whether it works or not, from a commercial standpoint, I have no idea. But I do think that they're going down that lane, and I assume that they are trying to internally prove to all the people inside of Peloton that they mean it.
Yeah, it's a certainly an interesting decision that many business leaders need to navigate. I think more so today than ever before, probably. But I think it's something that certainly needs to. There's some good lessons here. Even going back, you mentioned CrossFit earlier. If you look at what happened to Glassman around this, and it's almost like you're better off just to say, look, this is what we do. We're a fitness company, and we just keep out of all this stuff, because you don't see many examples of when people make these decisions that it ends up being a good thing for the company. And I know, as you said earlier, sometimes by not making a statement, people judge you. But I think out of the two positions, not saying anything and letting people make their mind may be a safer bet than saying something and then, taking the arrow for it.
For what it's worth, I agree with that. I would much rather be on that side of things, because I'm not the expert in these subjects, right? Like, that is not the business that we're in. I mean, we're not in the business of trying to be political experts. CrossFit's a fascinating one, because I think we could argue they were leaning one direction pretty hard, and then they sold the company and they tried to switch to the other direction pretty hard. And now they're sort of in this gray area of, what are we? And I think that they are certainly, working really hard to figure that out. But that was very difficult for them to reconcile the two different brand images that they tried to project.
Well, I think CrossFit is still in its recovery path. Now, it's certainly not back to what it used to be. But
Yeah.
look, I mean, this ultimately comes down to, as well, how we get information, right? I mean, we live in a world where people get information through social media, through TikTok, Instagram, and I'm not disputing that. That's just how we consume information today. But it doesn't go through the journalistic process that maybe we grew up with in terms of how we get information. Yes, times have changed. Yes, we have to get information more quickly. And now we have AI as well, right? So now we're searching things and trying to get answers from AI, and we're relying on AI to give us answers. If we asked AI about this question, it's going to have an opinion. But I still think that there is the human element that is important. And I agree. I mean, I think in some ways, yes, you're going to be judged for not making a decision. But if you don't know about the topic, you shouldn't also feel forced to make a decision as well.
My wife is a lawyer turned investigative journalist, and so I have seen the kind of rigor that goes into making a statement, and it's strong. I mean, it takes a lot to say this is what happened. I clearly learned a lot from that, thankfully.
Well, I think that's it for this week. I think we've just about run out of time. But Jim, Thank you so much for joining us and providing your opinions.
And Jim, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
Thank you very much.